Hey guys, in this video we're going to be talking about section 1.1, key features of functions, and this is day 1. So the first thing I want to talk about is something you actually should already know. You learned this, back in middle school or algebra 1, and it's finding X and Y-intercepts. Okay, so a few things that you need to remember, right? So remember what each thing is. So remember a X-intercept intersects the x-axis therefore y is always 0. That's important for two reasons. One, you need to write your answers for x and y-intercepts as a coordinate point, so it'll always be x, 0. And then when you're solving algebraically, you can always substitute 0 in for y and solve. So similarly, a y-intercept intersects the y-axis. Y-intercept. Therefore, x is always 0. So your point will be 0, y. Okay. So real quick, zeros of a function. You may or may not have heard of this before, but zeros of the function are the x-intercepts. Because they are the input values that result in an output of 0, so we call them zeros. So then to find an x-intercept, I already said this, but let's just write it down. So to find the x-intercept or intercepts, remember there could be more than one depending on the function, substitute 0 in for y, and then for y-intercepts, very, very, very similar, substitute 0 in for x. And then I always recommend drawing a picture if you can't remember. So like a little sketch. Okay, so that's your quick review for x and y-intercepts. Now let's review different kinds of brackets. So we're going to be talking about increasing, decreasing, positive and negative intervals, and we use different types of brackets for notation. So we use two different types. They're used for interval notation. And then there's two types that we're going to be working with. The first one is a hard bracket. So a hard bracket is used when a point or value is included or it exists. So you're going to have to ask yourself that question, does it exist? And if it does, then we can use hard brackets. And they look like this. The second kind is a soft bracket. Okay, and you could probably guess the definition. So it's used when a point is not included. So it doesn't exist, or it doesn't make sense, which we'll talk about. So these brackets should be really familiar to you because we've already worked with domain and range, and we use these for domain and range problems. So why are we using them now? The brackets or interval notation is used for determining positive and negative intervals. So remember, domain and range are intervals, right? It's our interval from left to right for domain, and the range is our interval from down up, right? Y values. So going further with intervals, we're going to talk about positive and negative intervals. So in this video, I'm just going to go over the definitions. We're not going to do examples. We'll do that in class. So first of all, we need a graph. So it doesn't matter how big your graph is because we're not doing a legit example. It's just I want the coordinate plane as a visual. So for positive and negative intervals, we're thinking of positive and negative kind of like above ground and below ground. So everything above is going to be positive and everything below is going to be negative. So everything down here is negative, just like your y values are negative down there, and everything above is positive. So let's take notes on that. So anything above the y-axis x-axis. Anything above the x-axis is positive, and anything below is negative. So then you might be asking yourself, well, what about the actual x-axis? Well, that's not positive or negative. That's just neutral. It's zero. So the axis, let's do it in the same color. The x-axis is not positive or negative. So a couple just key things to note are we read a graph from left to right. Okay, so we're going from left to right when we're deciding the positive and negative values. We write our answers in interval notation. And then you need to just ask yourself questions like, do the points make sense? So if it's up here, it would be positive. So then it's a hard bracket because it's included and it can be positive. But if it's on the axis, it's not positive or negative, and so it would be a soft bracket. But we'll talk about that in an example. Okay, now I want to talk about increasing and decreasing. So for increasing and decreasing, once again, we're reading from left to right. And then you guys should be familiar with increasing and decreasing, right? Increasing means it's going up. Oh, should be a G. Having a moment. So increasing is going up, decreasing is going down. And we're asking ourselves, like, what is the interval it's increasing or decreasing? So it's written in interval notation. All right, and we've got a little bit of time, so we can do a really quick example. So I'm gonna pause my video and make a graph, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I know I wrote a lot of words. We're just gonna say, okay, where is it positive, negative, increasing, and decreasing? Probably pause the video and just copy down the graph. And then this is, I just wrote this down, this is what we're thinking. So when we look at this graph, when is it positive? Well, that means that we're asking, when is the graph above the axis? What is the interval? So if we look here, it's above the axis from here to here, right? So from 1 to positive 3. Now, what kind of brackets do we use? Well, at 1, is this point positive? It's in the positive area, but because it's an open circle, we don't include it. And then here, well, this is on the axis, and remember the axis is neutral, so that's not positive, so that's also a soft bracket. Okay, now when is it negative? So it's negative when it's below. So we're below from 1, 2, 3, 4. So from negative 4 to negative 1. And those points are negative. So we're going to use hard brackets because a point could be negative, but then it's also negative over here. So this is where we use union, similar to domain and range. So from 3 to negative infinity, from left to right, from positive infinity. And 3 is on the axis, which is neutral, and infinity is not a number, so we use a soft bracket. All right, finally increasing, so from left to right. So it's increasing from negative 4, and it's increasing until we get to negative 1. And then a point by itself is not increasing or decreasing, so we just use soft brackets. So similarly, it's decreasing from 1 to, remember, x values, so from 1 to infinity. And that's it.